Before we begin, make sure you subscribe to After the Sirens and leave a comment below, because this channel exists for people who take history seriously and want to learn something that most documentaries never explain fully. What you're about to hear is not speculation, not fantasy, and not entertainment history. It is a practical historical framework that real communities use to survive occupation, scarcity, and collapse. When people hear the words World War II guerrillas, they often think only of sabotage, ambushes, and gunfire. That focus misses the most important truth. The majority of successful resistance movements were not built on combat at all. They were built on community discipline, resource protection, intelligence control, and social cohesion under extreme pressure. Food, water, fuel, information, and trust mattered more than bullets. In this guide, we're going to examine how those historical systems actually worked and how the same principles can still be applied today to protect local resources in times of crisis, without romanticism and without exaggeration. Why did guerrilla movements succeed? Well, it's because they protected systems, not territory. The most effective World War II resistance movements understood that holding ground was less important than preserving function. French underground networks survived because they decentralized control of resources rather than concentrating them. Yugoslav underground networks survived because they decentralized control of resources rather than concentrating them. Polish underground networks survived because they decentralized control of resources rather than concentrating them. Scandinavian underground networks survived because they decentralized control of resources rather than concentrating them. Food caches were, spread across villages. Medical supplies were hidden in civilian locations. Information was compartmentalized so that no single arrest could collapse the network. The lesson here is that community defense begins with systems thinking. Protecting a water source, a grain store, or a medical supply today means ensuring redundancy, discretion, and shared responsibility rather than visible fortification. A modern application of this principle can be seen when communities map critical resources and deliberately avoid placing all control in one authority or one location. A single well, fuel depot, or warehouse becomes fragile under pressure, but multiple smaller reserves managed cooperatively and quietly create resilience without drawing attention. How intelligence and observation mattered more than force. Guerrilla movements during the war invested heavily in local observation. Farmers, shopkeepers, railway workers, and even children acted as early warning systems. They did not confront threats directly. Instead, they reported patterns. Who was moving through the area, at what time, and with what purpose? This passive intelligence allowed communities to protect resources by adjusting behavior rather than escalating conflict. In a present-day context, this translates into community awareness rather than patrols. Neighbors knowing normal patterns around shared resources like water points, clinics, or supply routes allows early detection of stress or misuse. When a community knows what normal looks like, it can respond calmly to anomalies by coordinating access, limiting strain, or calling for lawful intervention before crisis escalates. Why discretion and invisibility protected supply lines? One of the least discussed aspects of World War II resistance was how carefully supply movement was disguised. Supplies were moved in small quantities, at irregular intervals, and often disguised as ordinary civilian activity. The goal was not secrecy through silence, but secrecy through normality. This principle applies directly to modern, local resource protection. Communities that quietly rotate access schedules, share responsibility across households, and avoid broadcasting stockpiles are far more stable during shortages. Public displays of abundance attract pressure. Quiet continuity discourages it. Social cohesion was really the true defensive barrier. No resistance movement ever survived without strong internal discipline. In fact, theft, hoarding, and internal conflict destroyed more underground networks than enemy action ever did. The groups that succeeded enforced their shared norms, not through violence, but through, social accountability. Reputation genuinely mattered. Trust was the real currency. These days, protecting shared resources actually requires much the same approach. Clear community agreements on things like access, maintenance, and responsibility are what prevent panic behavior when resources start to tighten. When people know the rules are fair and, importantly, enforced socially, they're just less likely to act selfishly. The role of adaptability under changing pressure can't really be overstated. Guerrilla groups, for example, constantly adapted. If one supply route became dangerous, it was abandoned, and, honestly, without any sentiment. If one leader was compromised, authority simply shifted. Flexibility was what kept those systems alive. Modern communities can apply this by planning for change rather than permanence. Water access plans, food distribution systems, and emergency coordination should be reviewed and adjusted regularly. Static systems break under dynamic stress. Historical resistance survived because it expected disruption and planned for replacement, not defense of a single method. Why legality and legitimacy mattered even in wartime. An often overlooked truth is that successful resistance movements worked hard to maintain moral legitimacy within their communities. When they lost public trust, they lost protection. People stopped sharing information, supplies dried up, legitimacy was survival. For contemporary application, this means that community defense must always remain lawful, transparent in intent, and rooted in shared benefit. Protecting resources is not about exclusion, but sustainability. History shows that communities protect what they believe serves everyone fairly. If this kind of historically grounded practical analysis is why you're here, subscribe to After the Sirens and share this video with someone who still believes history is only about the past. Leave a comment and tell us which resistance movement you want examined next. History doesn't repeat itself, but it trains those who are willing to study it carefully.